All right, you joyously miserable accursed. Let's get this pod happening. It's Hurley here. And yes, this intro on an early Monday morning is how I remind myself who I am. I also that I have excellent friends. Scott Reed, Jordan Lightness, and Fred Delory, your ever-loving political panel, are all here. Fred's very excited, and we can use this to distract from the fact that Scott and I are sad. But we can use Fred's excitement over the New York Knickerbockers, who, as near as I can tell, the research I've been able to do, are by quite a margin outscoring their opponents more than any other team in NBA history has outscored their opponents in the playoffs. Fred, is this one of the great basketball teams of all time? And why am I not hearing about it until now?
Well, look, it just came together a few weeks ago in the first round of the playoffs when they really caught fire. 11 straight wins, record-setting point differential. They are just crushing everybody by 20-some points a game going into the finals. And as a conservative, I can't help but be really fucking scared given what happened to us just last year when we were 20 points up in the polls. So I am cautiously optimistic, but I've been down this road recently in the political sense. So it is.
San Antonio's going to read their platform, and then they're fucked.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course, it's San Antonio. The last time we were in the finals 26 years ago, that was the team that beat us. So it is maybe it's an opportunity for revenge.
There you go. Well, I think I speak for Scott in this regard. I hope that your team doesn't forget to how to score. And in fact, I hope that your team doesn't forget how to shoot altogether, because that can really be a setback in these kind of competitions.
Yeah, it's important to be able to score in sports.
Yeah. Oh. Even to attempt, just to attempt is worth it, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. To go to the arena, I think, is a critical first step.
Okay, but as bummed out as you guys are, you had to be a little bit cheered. I mean, did you guys see there was 20,000 people out in Montreal for the parade for the Montreal Victoire for the Walter Cup? That's amazing.
Yes, that is good.
That was so good to see.
It really doesn't compensate for what happened to the Montreal Canadiens, though, which was a shockingly bad ending to what had been a very inspiring story for, I'm sure, all Canadians.
I think so. But maybe you're emotionally invested in the wrong league. That's what I'm saying.
You got to diversify. All of
you got to diversify.
Yeah, that's like my emotional investments are in deep trouble. The market is not strong for some time.
Just take a note from Carney. More partners. You just need more, spread it around.
Dance with everybody. All right, speaking of which, here's the rundown today. We're talking technical recession here, 2 consecutive quarters of shrinking GDP. Economists are unclear as to what it means, but Pierre Poilievre says there's nothing technical about it. He's calling for an emergency debate on the economy. Mark Carney was in New York last week giving a speech telling investors and business leaders that a strong Canada can make America great again. Was it smart positioning? Not smart positioning? Scott Reed has a point of view. We know that. We'll talk about it. And then what happens when you put a former prime minister and 3 former cabinet ministers in a room to talk about Canada backsliding on climate change? That's our cursed clipping from David Thurton at cbc.ca. And if there's time, a brief flyby on what happened this weekend in the BC Conservative leadership race, and finally the great Mr. Pinsent and our Hey Yous. So let's get to it, and let's start with this recession business. Fred, it's called technical because the technical definition of a recession is 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth, and the last quarter had 0.1% negative growth. I don't really think it matters. I think it's all feels like a recession to voters. And the truth is, if you look at the last number of quarters, that the economy has ground to a dead halt. No growth in there. The question is, who do people blame? And Poilievre is trying to make people blame Carney. I think it's early, but what do you think?
Yeah, I think he's absolutely trying to blame Carney for every single thing that happens in any certain way, which I think is a bit of a risky game he's playing here when he's doing that. Because I think the vast majority of Canadians look at the Trump threat and what's happening there. And I think they put it all onto that. Whether that's fair or not, I don't know either. There's also 10 years of the previous Liberal government that, I know we're going to talk the climate file later, but there's lots of anti-growth sentiment in Canada that was building up for a long time. And those, those chickens came home to roost. And right now, it does look, though, to Canadians that Carney's trying to do something here about this. So, when Poilievre comes out and he says, Carney's been prime minister for 4 quarters and 3 of those quarters have been negative growth. I think it's a big stretch to say that's Mark Carney's fault. And I think people are going to have a hard time buying that. And it's the risk that Poilievre goes into when the sky is falling every day for this guy. And when you're trying to blame really, it is Canada's new government in so many ways. I know there's lots of old players, but Carney has done effectively made this look like a brand new government that they're trying to do new things. And if you're trying to set up for success in an election that is 2 to 3 years away, I don't think by screaming the sky is falling every day is how you do that.
So, Scott, I think Fred's right about how that plays politically. I think he's correct about that. But I also am aware that when there has been positive economic news, the government, curiously to me, has been anxious to take credit for it. Anytime there's been modestly decent job numbers or anything like that, they've been out there talking up the economy. Now, we've talked about this in the past, but this economic context that we're in right now, this 3 consecutive quarters of no growth, this was inevitable given what's going on with the United States. And I sort of feel that the government's put themselves in a weaker position than they could otherwise be on this.
Yeah, let me come back to that, or we can come around to that. I want to start just on the top of it, like at the very top level, because I think there's risk here for both Poilievre and Carney. And I think, my preferred way of looking at a lot of these communications issues, political communications issues, is onus. And I think that when Poilievre comes barreling out to the microphone and claims that this technical recession is, first of all, a hardcore real recession, and dismiss the experts. They're all full of shit. You feel it in your bones. You feel it in your grocery cart. You feel it in your gas tank, right? And it is the singular fault of Mark Carney. I think he places the onus on himself. And it conjures the dynamic you guys are talking about, where a lot of Canadians go, well, I don't know, man. Like, that feels like bullshit politics to me. That feels to me like you're making a claim that doesn't correspond with what I think already. And so by putting the onus on himself, I think he's making a mistake. Not only that, but the obvious peril, which always confronts opposition leaders during tough economic times, which is, are you cheering for failure? He looked like he was gleeful and enthusiastic to welcome a recession. He wants it to be a recession. And so that's something that he's got to be careful about. And it's a gear he's never been particularly good at calibrating. But there's risk for Carney as well. And the risk for Carney is such a technocratic government. It gets so, and the prime minister in particular, gets so haughty when these questions of, technical economic matters and technical finance matters. We saw him snap at Marika Walsh the other day when she questioned him about some of the underlying contracts in the implementation agreement. They can get snotty about this stuff. And if they retreat to just a second, let's make certain that we all understand this is not an actual full-blown recession. This is a technical recession. There's a very strong possibility there will be upward revisions in the numbers 3 months hence, and as a consequence, we'll be demonstrating that there actually is no recession. That's all. Now, they haven't done that, right? But it wouldn't shock me if they did, and I think it's a real problem. I guess the best thing you could say is that Poilievre thinks he's playing the long game, right? I'm just going to lay track. But I think that's a theoretical approach to political communication. I'll keep saying it's Carney's fault, and then 6 months, 2 years from now, people will start to blame Carney for stuff because I've planted seeds in that garden. I think that's a mistake. I think he has to constantly stay with where the public is at, because he has a specific personal brand issue that he's too negative, he's too partisan, he's too bare-fanged, and he'd rather succeed politically even if the country fails economically. That's his disposition. So he has to be hyper-conscious of that, and he's not. And when you talk, David, about the government taking credit, yeah, it does. But in a weird way, the broad political context with Trump permits them to do that, because the psychology of Canadians is, you know what? Jesus Christ, if there's good economic news, we must be doing something above and beyond what would be rational, because Trump is working so hard to sink our economy. Anything good must be the consequence of us slipping one past the goalie. But bad economic news follows to Trump. I'm not saying that's fair, but I do think that's a dynamic we're in right now where, Donald Trump is responsible for how shitty the Yellowstone spinoffs are. Like, everything is Donald Trump, and that is beneficial to Mark Carney.
I mean, people use the word sustainability pretty broadly, eh? It looks impressive in a press release, sounds good in a speech from a podium, but words like that are empty without action items and continuing accountability for those actions. Every year, our presenting sponsor TELUS publishes their environmental, social, and governance report. Sustainability is one of the pillars that guides their ESG work. Not just the word, the achievements. Because every year, the report puts in print the priorities TELUS focuses on for the next year and provides an accounting of ongoing goals and projects. Let me detail some of it. Operational GHG emissions have been reduced by 79% since 2024, with over 15,000 tons of emissions cut since they began transitioning from copper to fiber in 2021. TELUS and their people planted 6.8 million trees to help mitigate climate change and contribute to ecosystem restoration. They've increased renewable energy consumption by 500% since 2024. Almost 74% of total waste has been diverted from landfills. 96% of operational electricity is now procured from renewable or low emitting sources. And here's a mouthful they tell me is quite excellent. TELUS's energy intensity per terabyte of data throughput on their network has improved by 53% since 2019. But the capstone is none of this stuff is a capstone. It's the evidence of a continuing drive to achieve both big and smaller sustainability goals and leverage their technology to become net zero by 2040. One other thing, it's a big topic, so we'll sustain the telesustainability conversation next week. Yeah, it's funny. Jordan, there's sort of two competing things at work here in my view. One of which is I've never seen a recession. If we are going into, and let's say it's worse, let's say it's longer, and let's say it's deeper, because how could that not be the case? I mean, they're grinding away these tariffs at our auto industry, grinding away at our steel industry, grinding away. So I've never seen a recession that didn't take a piece out of a government politically, even if not just because they are seen as the cause of it, but you're just around and people's lives are getting lousier. And there's an
Yes, you have.
inclination
Sorry to interrupt her question, but yes, you have, David. You saw it in 2009. And Stephen Harper filled that vacuum. It was a global economic crisis. It came home here, caused a recession. And Stephen Harper looked like a source of stability in that context and actually secured in getting a majority government. So we have seen it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was a highly unusual situation, I guess, as this one is. Okay. So it's a fair point. It's a fair point. And Jesus, I got challenged by Scott, and I'm back on my heels here.
Just fucking hand over the microphone.
It's all right. It's all right. Claw your way to the top, David.
I'm coming back. My second point was going to be, and I'm waiting for the challenge on this one. My second point was going to be that if you look around the Western world, you see people say things in my country are going in the wrong direction and things in the world are going in the wrong direction. A high degree of negativity. Canada is a bit of an outlier because Canadians say the world's going in the wrong direction, but Canada's going in the right direction. And so even though you've got these negative economic outcomes, people do generally think that the country right now, and they attribute it to Carney, is moving in the right direction. So maybe he's less vulnerable to this economic circumstance than normally would be the case.
I do think he has some protective measures, and one of which is the broadness of his political coalition. People are invested in his success. They voted for him. They selected him as the solution to the problem that they were trying to solve in the last campaign. And so they are giving him lots and lots and lots and lots of space to do that. And I think that you have to read the optimism about the direction with that in mind. This is also about people kind of validating their own ballot choice, which is also something for the Conservatives to remember when they're talking about Carney and they're talking about voters and they're talking about whose fault these economic challenges are. I think that for the Conservatives, the problem, and Scott and Fred really outlined, I think, some of the brand problems that Poilievre faces when he really personalizes those attacks to the prime minister. It underscores some of his weakest communication elements. But what it also does is it moves Canadians away from the center of the story about the economic crisis. It places actually the conflict between Poilievre and Carney at a personal level at the heart of that political story. And that's just not actually a very fruitful place to be, I would argue. I think that you have far more scope to reach out to Canadians and say, listen, we don't need to know whether it's a technical recession or not to know that things are really not going well. Like, I was grocery shopping yesterday, guys. I went to go buy some chicken thighs, and like, not even the fancy kind, like not even the boneless, skinless. It was $19. What a recession. What is economic pain? Like, when people feel that basic
It's a very
things,
forgiving meat, though, to cook.
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Listen, in deference to my family's critiques of my cooking, we choose forgiving cuts in our house. But like, this is an example. When people feel that things that used to be basic, used to be easy in their life, or that are essentials are out of reach economically, that is the political danger spot for governments. And I think that I do see problems, I do see trouble on the horizon for the Carney government on the economic file, not so much necessarily because of the argument that Poilievre is making, but rather because we've seen time and again that Carney's approach to addressing the economic challenges that Canada is facing is very structural, it's very long-term, and it's very based in ideas that involve, trade diversification, increasing private investment, leveraging huge amounts of public money in order to make these private investments viable. And that's all well and good, but the difference that people are going to feel in their daily lives is very distant. So there's a big space between what Carney is advocating for and the actual impact that's going to be felt. And in the meantime, right now, we saw the numbers coming out last month. So we're at a 6-month high for unemployment. We're 6.9%, so pushing 7% unemployment. We have extremely high unemployment among young people. So those of you who've got teenagers looking for work, it's about 15% unemployment right now. So people are going into a period of increased instability in their income. They're feeling that. And right now, our government has been putting a lot of its focus on that trade diversification, on the investment environment, and very little focus on actually strengthening the social safety net that are catching people who are in these more precarious places. Like, I don't know, David, you probably saw Food Banks Canada today had a report out where they were talking about one of their number one policy concerns right now. And again, this is for food bank use, okay? Is the complete inadequacy of our EI system to catch people when they're in a wave of unemployment. So these are all things, I think, politically, these are chickens that can come home to roost. And just to bring it all back, I think there's a lot of opportunity for the NDP here to actually take up the space that Poilievre has kind of advocated in terms of putting working Canadians really at the center of that story and articulating some of the trade-offs that are happening when the government is extremely focused really at that high level and has not put the same energy and urgency into providing those supports for regular people that folks might actually need to see a difference on the ground.
For nearly 200 years, towns and villages and cities have clustered along railway lines. Our sponsor, CN, operates a network that runs through thousands of communities across North America. In the earliest days, the arrangement was entirely deliberate. Railways were lifelines. They brought in people and cargo and connected frontier towns to the rest of humanity. Nowadays, it's an evolving default. The railways are still there, more important than ever, and once established, cities and towns tend to grow. But as they grow, issues arise. People want the economic benefits that come with railways, but they also want tranquility and comfort and bucolic views. Trains, which are among the biggest and heaviest moving things on Earth, tend to bring noise and vibration and crossings where cars must wait and, of course, safety concerns. So, 23 years ago, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and the Railway Association of Canada decided it was time to cooperate and develop commonly understood guidelines for provincial and municipal governments, railways, and developers. Basically, that means planning and acceptable resolution of disputes. Things work better nowadays, but stuff changes. The proximity guidelines were updated 10 years later, in 2013, and are under review again. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities is meeting in Edmonton this week for its annual conference and trade show. CN will be there. Top of mind will be the Canada wide push for densification, meaning a lot of new residential construction to relieve the housing crisis. Containing urban sprawl while accommodating a growing population is imperative. Railways are crucial, and their services are more in demand than ever. All parties must have clear, commonly accepted rules if we're to have peaceful coexistence. Refreshed guidelines are coming. Stay tuned. Hey, Fred, that's sort of interesting because, I was talking with David Coletto last week about what's going on in politics, and we were talking about federal politics, and I said to him, so looks to me like the NDP are gaining a little bit, certainly have crawled off the number that they were in the election, and may have gained 4 or 5 points back if you look at sort of a consensus of the polling. And I said, but the Liberal number is steady. So where is that vote coming from? And he said, it's coming from the Conservatives. It's coming from, he said, the NDP are gaining back some of the anti-establishment crowd that the Conservatives had locked up entirely. Some of the break-it, some of the people, some of this Carney stuff is bullshit. Used to all rest with Poilievre, but he said the NDP are clawing a bit of it back. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's certainly a risk that the Conservatives have is that they could, and that's maybe we are living in a new reality where you have much more Conservative NDP votes going back and forth than you do with the Liberal Party, which obviously with the Liberals and 40s is a big, big problem, knowing that, we kind of shifted, we thought, into a two-party system, which makes it tight, but favors the Liberals. But if it's still a three-party system in which the NDP can eat into our vote, then we're really fucked. It's certainly not a great sign for the future if that's the case. Now, can the NDP hold it? Is it real? Is it just a mirage given that new leader, new voice? He is out there going on some, I would say, left-wing populist ideas that seem to be appealing to some. So there is certainly potentially something there. But it's, when we get to that next election is what will be the state of the economy? And that goes back to, the recession we're in now, the technical recession. Where are we in a few years' time? How bad or good is the economy? That is what's going to drive that ballot question next time, not anything that we're talking about today.
Yeah, I think that's right. I just wonder what the Conservative offering is, because Lewis is out there actually offering people that are feeling insecure or struggling. He's offering them some different new ideas. We can have a point of view about how compelling those ideas are to the general public, but he's offering something up. What I saw Poilievre say yesterday or the other day is the government needs to go back into the House and reverse every economic policy of the last 10 years. That's a different category of demand than you need to fix the EI program.
Absolutely. And on that point, Carney's doing lots of stuff that Poilievre wanted to get done. He's out pushing this, I would say, center-right economic package about building and getting things moving. That is a core of what the Conservatives wanted to see happen. So it is very challenging when you have the Prime Minister stealing from your own pile of ideas. And so what do? I guess you go back and say, well, there's more that legislation that could be repealed to get the economy going even faster, even though we had C5. That was obviously something that was supposed to do that. That was quite controversial in many ways. So yeah, we are fighting in a pool of voters that is center-right in many ways in terms of, Canadians want it change in government from Trudeau, and they got it. They got a center-right government right now. And it's very hard for a center-right party to compete with that. And that's, I think, where we're seeing it. And what concerns me and what scares me as a Conservative, what happens if Carney wins in 3 years' time and has another 3 or 4 years in government as a center-right Prime Minister, and his time is up. And by then, you know what? Maybe Canadians now want a left-wing or center-left Prime Minister.
Trudeau can come back.
someone like him could, right? Someone to the left.
Yeah.
And then where's the Conservative Party? Are we potentially looking at the longest run in history where we're out of office? I know that sounds extreme right now, but we'll be at 14 years by the time of the next election. Like, we're not heading in a good direction here.
Can we just call it quits right there and go for a drink? I like how this is trending, and I don't think
Now,
there's anything
events
that
still
needs
happen.
adding.
And
It's gonna be hard for you to top
economy
that,
shit
Scott.
in 3 years' time.
Well, let me try one goofy thought. I wonder if, first of all, I just want to say on that, pulling up on Fred's point, like, I think it is interesting. That's not all that Polyev has said, because he is driven into a smaller and smaller, tighter and tighter solutions corner. Because of what the prime minister has done. So now he's basically down to, and cut taxes for all businesses, just cut taxes, period. So it's the same prescription. When the economy's going well, cut taxes. When the economy's going poorly, cut taxes. Sort of like, okay, we get it, Johnny, one time. And then the other thing is, and ignore the courts. Any Indigenous Canadian that expresses the slightest grievance or concern with respect to any construction anywhere, just go right through their home, take over anything. Like, that's that. And it seems disconnected from reality and guaranteed to conjure conflict. I wonder, though, here's a thought, David. You have raised on this pod a number of times the question of why doesn't the government adjust its messaging to take fuller advantage of the crisis, insofar as instead of bristling at the idea that we have a technical recession or there's bad economic news and defensively rattling off all the things they're doing, why not actually, like, is this a crazy idea? Why don't the Liberals go to the speaker and say, you know what, let's have that emergency debate. We concur. Let's have an emergency debate on the economy. It wouldn't hurt. And they use that as an opportunity to mandate a new narrative. And I'm not exaggerating the impact of an emergency debate, but reorient, like, use it as a platform to say to every single caucus member and Liberal observer, dudes, we have a new message, right? First, we're going to say, you're goddamn right, it's tough. And by the way, it could get tougher, right? 2, that's because of Trump. It's in spite of what we're doing, not as a consequence of what we're doing. 3, here's some things that we're doing. And 4, I'm borrowing Jordan, and I'm going to do a couple things more that are much more immediate, because all of the solutions are structural, but the crisis is acute and immediate. And so add a little bit of that, but take advantage, like, actually say, you know what, fine, let's have that debate. And then everybody gets the same 2 pages of talking points. And it's no longer like the sort of financy type, hey, you know what, it's actually not that bad. It's pretty good. And by the way, you know what, Spain is really blowing dog out there, and we are way better than Spain. And, and so, like, I think there could be a tactical opportunity there. My guess is that the general.
I like that. I like that idea.
I just think there's probably generally like an allergy to, like, well, why would we give our opponents a platform and put them in control of the thing? But I think it could be a signature opportunity to reorient the message.
The past few weeks in Canadian politics have largely dealt with climate change related issues. There's been the final MOU signing, changes to industrial carbon pricing, a pipeline to the West Coast, and a national electricity strategy. But none of it has focused on the global threat of climate change itself, even though it's the most important underlying factor in this conversation. So, courtesy of our sponsor, the Canadian Climate Institute, here's a brief update on the latest. The short of it is, climate change is still here, still a grave threat to Canadian communities and our economy, and it's accelerating. The latest news came last week from the World Meteorological Organization. Their data shows global temperatures are likely to continue to be at or near record levels for the next 5 years. The likely range is between 1.3 degrees Celsius and 1.9 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. You may recall that the goal coming out of the Paris Agreement was to limit warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius. These are global temperatures. In Canada, warming happens at twice the rate of the rest of the world. In places like the Arctic, the WMO expects warming to be more than 3.5 times the global average. That will have negative impacts across the country. A reminder, last year was the second most destructive wildfire year in Canadian history. Prior to that, 2023 saw more than 6,000 fires torch a staggering 15 million hectares, more territory than the Maritime provinces combined. You may recall smoke descending on your neighborhood. This year, we can expect a big El Nino, so even hotter temperatures. The good news is we can reduce these impacts if we take action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and build a cleaner, more competitive economy. More at climateinstitute.ca. All right. So I'm going to move away from Scott for a second because he's already opined on this on CTV Question Period. And I want to hear what other people have to say before we go back to him. Jordan, Prime Minister in New York, said the following things: Canada Strong will help make America great again. And a bunch of people in Canada lost their fucking minds and said, oh my God, why is he repeating the president's language? And why? I thought he was the elbows up anti-MAGA guy. I mean, this is the same guy that that called Trump transformational. I mean, so it's not particularly surprising, and it seems to me quite clever to, in that speech, have reached out and said, listen, this is part of, we're facilitating your agenda. We're not hostile to your agenda. We're facilitating your agenda.
Yeah, I think that the framing of it is the issue. It's different. When he called Trump transformational, that was a very backhanded comment. That's a comment with many meanings. Like, he's transformational, but it doesn't mean it's
Right.
great, right? That was actually, I think, evidence of a real sophistication in terms of understanding how to relate to Trump as somebody who operates based on flattery, um, and also how to remain true to his political brand in Canada, which is standing up to Trump. And I think that that comment was really smart because of how it managed to thread the needle. I don't think this one did that. I think that the referencing Make America Great Again in the speech is really incongruent with Carney's brand. He didn't need to do that. He could make the same case without referencing MAGA itself. So for me, it was a bit of a head scratcher. And then, of course, it's like that also just becomes the headline, right? Like, that was the takeaway, which is not going to be viewed favorably in Canada by most people. So I don't think it was a win. I think it detracted from the content of his speech. Although, and I think others have observed this as well, like as I watched that speech, the thing that was interesting beyond that line was, again, the talk of Fortress North America. That's a very divergent thing when we compare the message to what he was saying in Davos. Like, he's talking about deepening integration, and Fortress North America implicitly is like without others, right? That is like a deepening that relationship with the United States. So I thought that that was interesting and definitely more incongruent with how I think a lot of Canadians think about his orientation. Overall, I thought the speech itself was probably something that you would want those messages passed to the U.S. administration through as many different intermediaries as possible in order to set the table for what looks like the next phase of talks around CUSMA, which appear to be, of course, coming to a bit more of a concrete point. But I don't know that you would want that in the Prime Minister's voice, and I particularly don't think you would want it with the MAGA there. I don't see what the advantage is for him. I think he's trading off some of the strength that he's built domestically on being able to hold that really kind of tenuous balance for not a lot of gain. So I was out on it. I didn't think it was very good.
Fred, what do you think about this Prime Minister's speech in New York as a political outing here in Canada?
Yeah, well, look, I have ordered hats, for you folks. Hopefully, they'll be ready by Canada Day for, Canada Strong will help make America great again. Is a excellent
It's like
slogan.
wrapping around the.
Yeah, it's a bit wordy, but it works. I'm not sure what the acronym is, but look, I thought it was it was incredibly interesting given the Davos speech, the rupture, the strategic weakness that the Prime Minister has mentioned before. But at the same time, he's talking to a U.S. audience, and obviously you can't talk to any audience singularly anymore. You talk to every audience when you open your mouth, particularly when you're Prime Minister. But when he's talking to the U.S. audience, and we're still trying to get something happening here, a deal of some sort or some kind of negotiation happening, I think it was on that front incredibly brilliant. We have Ambassador Hoekstra coming out and saying, it's great to see a positive message like this, and I think it hit that audience well. The Canadian context is, how does this play out? Do we get something that works for us long term? And if they can point back to this being one of the things that helps succeed, then this could be a brilliant move by the Prime Minister in that he did this. Of course, if everything goes to shit and things get worse, and obviously there's always that risk dealing with that administration, it could backfire. But I think it's something that seems to play well. I think it shows he's incredibly clever, the Prime Minister is. Now, is he too clever? Does this backfire? Is the ultimate risk. But I think, all in all, I think it was a win for him that he did that.
The following message is brought to you by Unsmoke Canada. Not all nicotine products carry the same risk. Smoke-free alternatives, like heated tobacco, vaping products, and nicotine pouches, don't burn tobacco or produce smoke. While not risk-free, evidence shows they have the potential to be significantly less harmful than cigarettes. Yet, Canadian regulations restrict access and limit communication about these alternatives, keeping adult smokers in the dark. Sweden has accepted this science, embraced smoking harm reduction, and driven smoking rates below 6%. Canada has the tools to do the same, but it requires political will. It's time to align regulation with science, expand access to smoke-free products, and empower Canadians to make informed choices. The evidence is clear. The opportunity is real. Canada can be smoke-free. Learn more at unsmoke.ca.
Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, Scott, you had a strong negative view about the line, and I just am curious about, I mean, in some respects, when you're dealing with the U.S. these days, you have an audience of one person, and you need to get a message to that one person. And so why wasn't this little bit of flattery worth it?
Because it wasn't worth it. There are a number of things that I disliked about it, to be honest with you. I disliked it on a number of levels, I suppose I'll say. I disliked it on a tactical level. I disliked it on a strategic level as well. And I'm not acting like solely out of kind of foaming at the mouth Trump derangement syndrome, although I possess it wholly, right? Like, I'm like Chamey up in the backyard and literally shoot me like old Yeller. But I'm not, it's not just driven by that. To me, you of course can engage in flattery. You can be a little more unctuous in an environment like that. Perhaps you need to be. I mean, you can have a strategy. You can decide, I'm going to go in there, Sister Soljet. I'm going to go in there into the New York Economic Club, and I'm going to say, listen, you sons of bitches, here's what you need to hear, right? That's a strategy. It clearly wasn't his strategy. You can engage in flattery, but is it worth it to go to this far, to use this particularly fully loaded, wholly branded, absolutely and unmistakably established phrase? And I think it is, because unless we are on the brink of some kind of breakthrough, and it's the necessary final piece of the Jenga tower in order to actually get a broad deal that benefits Canadian employers and workers, I don't know why you would burn this much capital. And I do think it's a dangerous thing to say. I think that, and it's both parts of the sentence. It's that Canada Strong can help make America great again. To the tune of, what, 75%? Canadians do not wish to be part of that project. They understand MAGA. What do they understand it as? They understand it as a toxic aspiration to a past that never truly existed, that's fundamentally about making certain that white rich people hold on to their power, and we dislike and wish to roll back all of the changes that have been beneficial to anyone and anything else since. And then there's a whole series of other negative things associated with it that include putting Canada in the crossfire. And so if you're going to nevertheless say Canada wishes to complement and advance the project of MAGA, like, that is a hell of a thing to say. And as a speechwriter, you fall in love with your words sometimes. You particularly, and I am so guilty of this, you fall in love with the smart aleck, clever phrase. and you fight to keep it just because it's so damn good. But it's too damn good in this instance. It's too quotable. It's too weighted. It's too certain it'll be the headline. And I think it's too negatively freighted with a whole ton of meaning, almost all of which is pejorative. That's my first objection. I don't think we got out of it. That's my first objection. We don't get out of it what we should have gotten out of it. If we're going to use this motherfucking thing, we better get jobs and deals immediately. Okay? Second thing, though. I didn't understand the speech. I mean, if you listen to the speech, I think that sentence, that summarizing final sentence, it's discordant. I'm now not crystal clear on where we stand or what we're up to. And you know, Davos was a speech that said the world has been ruptured implicitly by the United States, and therefore the response is smaller states like ourselves are going to have to move dynamically and try to come together where we can, whenever possible, in order to advantage ourselves in response to hegemons who will not hesitate to squash us with their gigantic work boot. This said, here's Davos, there's been a rupture. By the way, we can come together as a North American unit all together and try to protect ourselves from this rupture. And I didn't understand that to be the project. So where are we at now? I don't know what our objectives are. Obviously, we'd love to have some continuation of CUSMA, but that was very confusing to me. So I don't really know what we're going for. Are we just going to try to wait Trump out, preserve as much CUSMA as possible, protect our interests as much as possible, and lay bets on every part of the table? Or are we working towards some kind of North American remedy that it's us against the rest of the world? And I don't see any evidence that we're pursuing that strategy in any respect other than this speech. So I'm confused.
Am I the only person that remembers in the spring of 2025 that Carney was talking about the need to negotiate a new arrangement, both security and economic, with the United States? Like, it's not like he ever said we wouldn't have a deal with them or we wouldn't have an arrangement with them, right?
But Davos intellectually rewired all of that, I thought. I thought the whole point of Davos is we'll bend the knee sometimes to the hegemons because we must. We live in a realistic world. Sometimes we're going to have to take what's available, but we better be doing everything else we can. This is, you know, we're gonna try to like throw our lot in, and we're gonna attach ourselves as much as possible to the Roman Empire. And I didn't understand the logic. I'm overstating it, but the logic seems to be that through line, isn't it? So what is it? What are we fucking up to? I don't understand.
I think we're up to two things. I think what Carney's trying to do, one, diversify our trade, get products to Europe and Asia and get things moving, exporting, not just importing, but getting things out. But at the same time, remembering no matter what, the United States will always be our largest trading partner, where more than a majority of our trade will be done all the time. It's unavoidable. We are a landlocked country with one border, and we need to, maybe it's pick what that trade looks like and map out what that looks like and how that, whatever this fortress is, whatever that means, I don't know, but I think there's two paths he needs to go on. We do need to find other markets, but at the same time, we just cannot abandon the biggest one.
But listen, what kind of a dance? What kind of a dance is this? We are.
You got to bob and weave, but this is bob and
as
whiplash
a
by
country.
employing mega.
We're trying as a country to lessen our reliance on the United States, to pivot away so we're less dependent upon them, so that we have other options, so that we can get more money for our oil, so that we can get more money for other things that we export, etc. And we're trying to do all that while they watch us. Right? So you have to do it in a way that doesn't seem so hostile. Right?
Understood.
Or
That's
there will
why
be
you
more
bob and weave.
repercussions.
It's a delicate balance, and I don't condemn the guy for where he makes what I think are strategic retreats and concessions and rhetorical concessions and sits at the White House in the ghastly gold-gilded prostitute of a place it is now. But I think employing MAGA is a bridge too far. I think it's too low of a toxicity. I think it's too symbolically significant, and you're only going to do it unless you get a full meal deal at the end, and I don't think we had any of that.
Right.
Well, I hope you still wear the hat because I put a lot of money behind that.
They better be made in Canada, Fred.
Here's a rhyme worth remembering from Enbridge Gas. Before you dig and make a hole, click before you dig is the goal. Seriously, though, You never know what's underground. Natural gas lines, power lines, telecom cables, they're not obvious, and they can shift over time because of erosion, past digging, and changing ground conditions. So even if you think you know where it's safe, you probably don't. Before any digging or soil disturbance, visit ontarioonecall.ca. And this isn't just for big construction projects. Mailboxes, fences, decks, trees, underground sprinklers, all of it counts. One utility strike can knock out services to an entire neighborhood. It can also cause serious injuries and expensive damage. And if you see someone digging with no locate flags or markings, say something. Be an ambassador for safe digging. A quick locate today can keep disaster away. All right. Our clipping today comes to us from CBC News and David Thurton. And it's called Trudeau's Climate Policy Architects Gather as Carney Changes Course. Here's an excerpt from it. It was the end of an era, and the four politicians who were its chief architects gathered in one room in Ottawa. Former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and his former climate change cabinet ministers, Catherine McKenna, Jonathan Wilkinson, and Stephen Guilbeault, on Wednesday were at the Rideau Club, a private social club near Parliament Hill. Political operatives behind the scenes, MPs across party lines, and journalists were also there. The room was packed, and on a warm Ottawa evening in May, it quickly got hot. For a decade, the four Liberal politicians and their staffers worked closely to change Canada's performance and image as a laggard on tackling climate change. The event's purpose? Raise a glass to Wilkinson, who soon takes up a diplomatic post as Canada's ambassador to the European Union. Wilkinson's speech gave no hint the soon-to-be diplomat was displeased with the direction of Carney's approach on climate change. He did mention that he came to Ottawa, leaving the private sector to advance efforts to fight climate change, and that the Carney government is making progress, suggesting it was not as fast as originally planned. But at the same time, global politics have changed. The other architects of the Liberal climate plan did not address the room, although the Master of Ceremonies, Wilkinson's former Chief of Staff Claire Seaborn, noted that Katy Perry's boyfriend was in the room, next turned to see Trudeau hanging at the back, smiling. He was one of the few men there not wearing a suit and tie. At one point, he yelled out that his life outside politics was great. So it really was a remarkable changing of the guard sort of moment. And everybody from the climate change fight was there. Elizabeth May was there, and Rick Smith from the Climate Institute was there. And it was like one last sort of gathering of the clan, if you will, the Trudeau government in exile. And it really is quite a remarkable change in one party's government, I guess, is the comment that I'm going to make. And I make this sort of observation privately to myself all the time, because so much of what Carney is doing is stuff that we tried to do with Paul Martin back in 2003. And we probably weren't as good as these people are. But one of the other factors that was a big thing that does not seem to be a big thing now is we didn't have permission to represent as much change as Carney is representing. If we had wanted to do as full a virage on policy as Carney is doing, we would have faced backlash from caucus and from former cabinet and from the party, etc. It would have been more difficult. It is interesting to see how little their resistance there is to completely undoing the Trudeau policy direction. Fred, what do you see from a distance?
Well, just on, I mean, you're comparing completely different scenarios. I mean, you guys with Paul Martin were the finance minister for the entire run. You can't divorce yourself from that. You guys were a part of the Chrétien government, where Carney, I know Conservatives tried to attach him because he was an advisor or who'd show up at caucus every few years and give a speech, but he really wasn't a part of it. And he can come in brand new. And at the same time, with a major change in the U.S., like the it's just a completely different scenario. It is remarkable to see that, Carney, if you look at his cabinet, the bulk of them were Trudeau era cabinet ministers. And there were people that were saying one thing one day and a completely different the other day. And I think it goes to how we really presidentialize our elections. We look at who the leader is, and that's who most people vote for when it comes to these elections. But Carney has done a remarkable job, but he's had the ability to do that by not being an insider, a true insider and a part of the cabinet for the last number of years. So there's no decisions there. There's nothing there that he never worked for Justin Trudeau. I know he was a chair of some economic advisory board for the Liberal Party for a few months. But he had that clean slate, and that allowed him to be able to pivot. But we see it at the provincial levels and other levels when you see a change in guard. Most time, that premier or new person that comes in was a part of the old guard in some way and could be tied to it. So he's been very fortunate and it was very smart of him to never take that job, to never become finance minister to Trudeau, because then he would own all of those previous mistakes if that was the case.
Right. Jordan?
Well, I mean, I continue to believe that the values flexibility of the Liberal Party would make an elastic band envious. Like, this is part of what's going on here, right? This is an adaptive vehicle. This is a power broker party, and what we're seeing is that in practice, right? That's being executed. And I think that the takeaway that I have coming out of Guilbeault's departure is that the Prime Minister is very clear that his coalition is quite broad, that includes, of course, now many former Conservative MPs, people like Marilyn Gladue, includes all sorts of folks, but there has been not only very little, but a shrinking and increasingly sort of pressured space for progressives within his caucus coalition. So I think the issue for him is that Guilbeault's departure, he's a polarizing figure across the country, although I do think it's a blow for them in Quebec. But it's more about what it says about how that coalition is being internally managed by the Prime Minister. He doesn't care about the left flank of the party. In fact, he seems to be going out of his way to alienate the left flank without trying to provide any balance to that whatsoever. Now, can he get away with that for now? Yes. Right now, because his positives are floating so high, I think he's protected on that. But at the end of the day, he is going to need those people. He's going to need those people who signed that letter. He's going to need those people that were in that room to be with him and to have some sense that progressives can feel comfortable being in that party and following. And I think that the real danger around the pivot, particularly on climate policy, and I mean, this is apart from actual problems, but in terms of walking away from more stringent climate action in a overheating world, the political problem is that it goes to who Mark Carney is, right? People really believe that they were electing somebody, progressives in particular, that they could feel very comfortable had climate credentials. This was a very important part of his personal brand. In fact, probably one of the few things that people really knew about him. They knew that he had a global finance background, and they knew that he cared about climate change. And it turns out he's not that guy, or at least he's not interested in presenting himself as that guy to the progressives who probably had that in their equation when they were deciding to support him. So I think this week was damaging for the Prime Minister. I think it was damaging internally for that coalition within the Liberal caucus. And I don't think it's the last time we're going to see this, because this isn't the only issue on which the left flank of the Liberal Party is absolutely just being shoved into a closet.
They're not being shoved. They're not being shoved.
Okay, they may be
They're not being
active
shoved. No, but it's an
door.
important distinction. It's an important distinction. They're not being shoved. They're walking into the closet. They're turning off the light, and they're saying, call us when it's okay to come back out. Like, literally,
for
that's
today.
what's occurring.
For today, they are.
For today. So we'll see how this thing unfolds. And it is a point that gets made reasonably often that Carney may have to worry about this left flank. He may have to worry about Avi Lewis. He may have to worry about his own left flank within the caucus. He may have to worry about climate issues, which just seem to be getting such short shrift. And he may at some point. But I look at this, this Last Supper. I'm surprised Freeland didn't come by and kiss Justin on the cheek just before the Romans dragged him off. Like it was. I look at this and I say, like, this means nothing in terms of immediate political fallout for Mark Carney. I really genuinely believe that, and I'm not being dismissive because I do think it could mean something further down the road, but there's 100 variables there. Right now, you got to go away before you can come back. So whether that's Justin Trudeau or climate, like it's way too early in this scene for people to start getting nostalgic about this and thinking it's a vulnerability for Carney. I don't. The miraculous ability of the Liberal Party of Canada to renew itself, right, is based on a change in leadership, a change in priorities, and that is a reflection of where's the public at, where's the problem at, and where are your opponents? Well, where's the public at? They have dropped climate as an issue. Where are your priorities? Economic, right? And where are your opponents, right? Right where you need them to be. Weak on the left, reasonably strong on the right. So you move into that space, and it's lining up like three cherries on a slot machine for Carney. Right now, might not forever. But that meeting last week, I'm glad people had a chance to say goodbye and all that. But let's not think that should cause Mark Carney 1 minute of lost sleep right now. I really don't think it needs.
No, let me introduce my own sense of reality to this, which is it is ludicrous to compare Carney's environmental climate policy to Trudeau's climate policy and decide that you would rather have Trudeau's climate policy because Trudeau's climate policy was headed for the fucking ditch. The choice is not between Carney's climate policy and Trudeau's climate policy. The choice is between Carney's climate policy and Poilievre's climate policy. There was no political durability to Trudeau's climate policy. It was not going to survive. It was one of the reasons he was going to lose, right? And so if anybody's angry that the consumer carbon tax is gone, well, I'm sorry. It was going to be gone, right? And keep going down the line. So to me, this is, I think that people that are nostalgic about shouldn't be nostalgic for Trudeau. They should be nostalgic for a different time when people thought about that and thought it was a priority. But that time is over right now.
Yeah, but David, I actually agree with you about that. But I think that the comparison to Trudeau's policy is not the problem. It's the comparison to who Carney represented himself to be on this that's the issue for him. I don't think there's anybody out there, and in fact, I haven't even heard that from our friends like Rick Smith, who are suggesting that the consumer carbon tax is the hill to die on. In fact, I don't even think anybody in that room would suggest that. But what they are saying is that the pendulum is swinging too far the other way. And the other thing I would introduce to this is that I think that right now there's an implicit bargain happening with respect to Alberta for this deal. This MOU is about potentially trying to secure some peace on that front with separation. And that is a bargain that is never going to pan out in Carney's favor. It is not accurate to say that separatists in Alberta are going to see this MOU and say, oh my goodness, we have gotten everything we wanted. We will certainly stand down now. So there is a lot being given away here.
Wait. I'm going to stop you right now because I disagree with you so virulently. So virulently.
Well, it's your show. I guess you can do that.
I'm going to get shit on the YouTube comments for interrupting Jordan, but nonetheless, I have to do it because Jordan, right? I agree that if you're a hardcore separatist, Alberta, who feels that the province has been ripped off since Confederation, you're not likely to change your mind because of but there are a whole lot of people who are on the edge, who are, do we need this as leverage? Alberta does get the short end of the stick. I can't imagine what the environment would be for a referendum right now if you had a federal government that was intransigently refusing to discuss a new pipeline for Alberta. It would be
but that's not the counterfactual, right? There's a whole gradient of things in between here and there is the case that I would make. And that for a lot of those voters, for a lot of those separatist voters, and even like soft separatists, if you want to call them that, people who might be interested in sending a message. This is an emotional debate. This is not a factual debate. They're not looking at a list of concessions by the federal government and saying, we've reached a threshold, so I no longer have any resentment. And I actually think that that particular pattern of thinking is pretty dangerous for the prime minister, because he is going to need to make an emotional case to those folks. But anyway, we're now well off the topic. But I think that that is, to me, baked into some of the trade-offs here, where chickens may come home to roost down the road, though not today, as Scott has pointed out.
Organically fed, free-range chickens
Coming home to roost.
coming home to roost.
Fred, did you watch what was going on out in Vancouver this weekend?
I did. I watched it quite closely. I've a lot of friends on lots of different campaign teams, and I've been talking to a lot of them for the last number of months. So yeah, I was quite tuned into it all.
Now, what's your take?
Look, the members elected exactly who I thought they would elect, someone who would ran as a conservative. This is a party that I know is kind of a mush of former Liberals or provincial BC Liberals and BC Conservatives, but it's truly a right-wing party. And the leadership race was going to come down to who really holds those values the most and can communicate that. And that's ultimately what happened at the result. For some time, I had a good sense that KLF, Carolyn Finley, was going to win it. And was not overly surprised or not surprised at all when she did.
Really, okay, because it really does seem evident, Fred, that this is evidence that they didn't want to be a coalition, that they broke away from that BC Liberal centrist coalition for a reason. They want to run as conservatives, these people, right?
That's 100% it. And that's where I think a lot of the membership was quite nervous about it going back to being a coalition. It was a fear of becoming another BC Liberal Party. And that's, there was a BC Liberal Party when this movement arose. When the BC Liberals banned Aaron Gunn from running for leader, that was kind of the kickstart to this. He's now a member of Parliament. And I know throughout the campaign, some called him the godfather of the Conservative Party in BC. And there was that sort of center-right feeling or right-wing feeling that they needed their own party, and they were able to grow this into something. And then, the Liberal/BC United collapsed and didn't even run candidates by the end of it. And they became the official opposition. I think a lot of them felt very guarded now because of that. And they didn't want any threat to take away their party.
Interesting.
I feel bad for poor John Rustad. And he must be sitting there going, Jesus H. Christ. I mean, man, I thought the whole point of this was to get rid of the crotchety old small c conservative reactionary element of the party. They dumped me like yesterday's
it's personal.
trash. And now they went ahead and they reconfirmed their commitment to that space. Like, why couldn't they have just kept me? I almost became premier for Pete's sake. Like, what the hell? This seems like a whole lot of effort to get exactly no place.
Oh, no, they got someplace for sure without him. Yeah.
Jordan,
Yeah.
This is presumably the candidate that the NDP would most like to run against of all the people that were in the race. It's not usual that the two parties agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for sure this is the candidate that the BC NDP would see as being most favorable to run against. Particularly it's she's socially conservative. She's there's all kinds of stuff. It's a rich text. There's a lot you can go into. There's a lot of fodder for them there to paint the BC Conservatives as very extreme. And I think it's important to remember that, in the last election, when the BC Liberals folded, the BC NDP benefited from a rump of those voters who did not feel comfortable going to BC United. So there is, very much a vote, segment there that probably will not feel comfortable under her leadership that is gettable for the BC NDP. But that said, I really think it would be a mistake to underestimate her. As a vehicle, the party is way better funded, way better organized, way more experienced than it was in 2024. And the EB government has accumulated a whole lot of barnacles. So that is, and if you think about how close the 2024 election was, way too close, given that particular formulation and the chaos that happened and Rustad's leadership, and it should not have been that close. So I think that there's not really a whole lot of comfort for the BC NDP here. They still have to do the work. Part of that work has been made a little bit easier I think, by the selection of Finlay. But it's not the whole hog. They got a lot to do, and it's still a steep climb for them.
When you say a lot to do in a steep climb, I'm openly wondering whether EB can win or whether they have to change the leader. And I think that his handling of UNDRIP may actually have undercut leadership to a point where it can't be recovered.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, certainly there are conversations around that. Whether it's recoverable or not is less clear to me. I think he still has a little bit of runway to do that. And I think that now, of course, having the leadership settled for the BC Conservatives is like an X factor as well, right? Because now you have another player. We're not comparing to a hypothetical. We're comparing to somebody very specific who's got very specific views on that topic in particular that a lot of people in BC will find quite extreme. So I think that it does help him in that regard.
Scott?
Well, the only thing I would add very quickly is we had this discussion around UNDRIP, a month or so ago, and I don't think she's unelectable. I think the currents in BC make it very plausible that she could become premier. And then you have to really worry about where things go. Like if you take a look at the combustibility of this separation argument and, the demand that is implicit there about like, why don't the courts just fuck off and shut up, right? And, Indigenous communities and all these claims, and you throw in UNDRIP on top of that, we could end up in a world where people aren't looking for resolution of these issues or progress on these issues. They're looking for a fight. They're spoiling for a fight on them. And it becomes a very, very ugly outcome because just because, Pierre Poilievre stands up at a microphone and says, just build the goddamn pipeline yesterday. And just because, if Finlay wins the next election, doesn't mean that the courts are going to say, all right, well, all these rights are now unenforceable because, the political the political climate is clear. And so then you end up in a situation that is ripe for really deep, dogged confrontation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think people in BC kind of understand that, which I think it's possible the BC Conservatives could overplay their hand on this issue. Yeah. But I don't think that EB can take advantage of it anymore. That's the question, whether it needs somebody else to take advantage of that. Because, I think his copybook on this issue is just so blotted.
I don't know enough about BC politics.
Yeah. No, but I know everything. Because I at least listened to Hotel Pacifica. Right. So
yeah, we have a podcast for that, Scott.
That's a very good source.
You can remedy that.
Yeah.
I tried to book a night, and I was surprised to find out it wasn't a hotel. I was shocked.
Found you.
You heard about the bar and everything.
Mike McDonald's basement on a food time.
Is the gym indoors? Or,
All right, Mr. Pinsent, it's that time. Can you gather the accursed from wherever they've wandered?
Ladies and gentlemen, please return to your seats. The Hey Yous are about to begin.
All right, Jordan, you're in the front of the class with your hand up. What do you got?
It has to go this week to Wab Canoe, obviously, for his crisp and succinct and devastating fact check of Danielle Smith at the Western Premiers meeting on what the meaning of duty to consult is. And if you haven't seen that clip, you should go see it. It's delicious. It's satisfying for those of us who really have a lot of concerns and fatigue with some of the politics that Danielle Smith is playing. And you can see why Wab Canoe continues to be the most popular premier in Canada with approval ratings that rival the prime minister's because he's very good at this. And I think a lot about, and this goes back to the conversation we were just having about BC and UNDRIP, and I think a lot about the positional challenges of being the first Indigenous premier in Canada in this environment where we are experiencing a real backlash on issues of Indigenous rights and title and even the idea of reconciliation. And I think that Premier Canoe has such a deft hand and an awareness of how to navigate that with good humor, with directness, and with a clear attachment to his values and to Manitoba's interests in a way that is just unbelievably complex as a political calculation. And as a personal one. And so I just wanted to tip my hat to him this week because I think that that was a good moment. That's an important moment for Premier Smith to be checked also by her peers. And for other premiers to very clearly articulate that the kind of politics that she's putting forward right now are very detrimental to our country overall. So I was happy to see that, and I salute him for that work.
Yeah, it was a solid outing, no doubt about it. Scott?
Actually, I kind of have the same, but mine, I guess I'll come at it from the other direction, which is I think that Danielle Smith has been so fascinating to watch, and I am the 1 millionth person to make this observation. She has this sorcerer's like talent for saying ridiculous, untrue, and irrational things and making them sound in that talk radio lilt entirely plausible and reasonable. You find yourself nodding your head as she says things with which you disagree intensely. And I thought that moment with Wab Canoe, it's awkward to do that, to interrupt a fellow premier at a press conference. It was awkward. I mean, Evie's obviously been, squaring off, but that was a conflict oriented Western premiers meeting. And I wonder if one of the consequences of this whole process that Danielle Smith hadn't fully calculated is that people are now wholly committed to the business of calling her on her bullshit. And maybe that doesn't matter to her, but I think it will matter. And especially because she is getting it from both sides, I think she's in for a very, very different 5 months ahead than she's ever had before. And I'm including that ridiculous moment where she bailed on her own party and crossed the floor. And that was obviously bonfire.
It's one of the great moments in Canadian politics.
It's just astonishing that anybody would walk out of that bonfire without their clothes singed. But, here she is as premier. But I don't think that she's fully, I don't think they had fully priced in the way in which that easy communication style that she has employed is actually going to be interfered with now. I think people are going to interrupt her a lot more often.
All right. Fred?
My hey yous to back to BC, all of the campaign workers and volunteers that have been slogging it for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, however long it's been. We all know what leadership
Corey's been out there for 4 years. I looked it up.
Feels like I think I've aged 4 years since he's left.
That's how it feels to Ford, I think.
But look, leadership campaigns are a unique type of campaign where you are literally building the plane as you're flying it. It's not like a general election or a local riding campaign or municipal campaign. It's like you're building things as you go. You're building your team. You're putting it together, and you become almost like a family over that time. And you love and hate each other as you go through it. But as soon as that election is over, as soon as the results are announced, it's done. The family's dead in so many ways. It's just the whole thing just changes. The relationships change. You keep those memories, of course, and those friendships, but it's when you're in a leadership campaign, it's all encompassing. It's all 24/7. It's all you think about. And I know personally, every leadership race that I've been actively involved in, when I come out of it, win or lose, there's a depression that I go into, and I just because the taps are turned off. And it's not go-go, and everything just changes. So hey you to all the people that are put in from all 5 of the campaigns that made it to the end. I know there's about 9 candidates at one point, but out of those 5 that stayed to the end, great job of fighting for your candidate and doing what you could do for your province. And I know this is always a weird time, win or lose, coming out of it.
All right.
38 years ago, David and I met during a leadership, and we've been a couple ever since.
There's
So
no
I know.
bond.
Goes
There's
to
no
show you.
bonding like the trauma bonding of leadership races. That
There
is
is
Especially
nothing
losing
else like
ones.
it.
totally.
Yes.
Especially losing ones, which that one was. I think I blame you, personally.
Well, I ride with bad karma. My first time out was a blazing failure.
My hey you goes out, and I have to look for opportunities to do this because they don't come naturally to me. My hey you goes out to Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe, who has decided to cut Danielle Smith loose. And I wasn't sure that was going to be the case. I wasn't sure that he wasn't going to play footsie with her. He faces some of the same pressures from his party, some of the same rural voters, but he has made it crystal clear that unlike Danielle Smith, he does not favor a referendum. He supports the country. And unlike the United Conservative Party, the Saskatchewan Party is a fully federalist party and fully committed to the country. So I may not like a lot of things about that government, but I like that part of that government. And I like the fact that he's had the courage to stand up, because they've been partners in a lot of things, but he's clearly differentiating from her on this. And I think it's important that she and the UCP be isolated on this point. So, hey, you, Scott Moe. All right, you three. Thanks for doing this with me today. This was fun as always. Thank you, all you accursed who watched or listened to the show, and to the sponsors who make it possible. And come back next week for more of this kind of frivolity. You can't beat it. I'm telling you, anywhere in the known universe. See you next week. Take care.